What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Gaelic Gridiron podcast. We're back after a bit of a hiatus, and I'm delighted to be joined for the first episode back by Mr. Aaron Perez of the Punt Factory. Aaron, welcome.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, Jimmy, man. I'm excited to have a chat with you.
I believe it was your birthday during the week, so first of all, happy birthday.
You're
Uh,
37 years young, man. Thank you.
yeah, did you get up to anything fun? How was it, or were you working?
No. I mean, actually, that was the day. To be fair, that I heard about Dan. I got a call from his agent, our agent, and mom, and she told me that keep it on the low down. But he made the 50. That was the best birthday present I could ask for as a coach, man. So hung out with my boy and my wife, and celebrated Dan. It was a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. A big day here as well when that news was breaking through, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But first of all, you were a punter yourself in Division One college football. You played for the UCLA Bruins.
Yep.
So can you kind of tell me about life as a college football specialist in that kind of environment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the game now is a lot different. So I played from 2004 to 2008, which at that time was in the Pac-10, not the Pac-12. Um, you know, Being a specialist at that level, I mean, even then, um, it's a lot of pressure, right? It's kind of like being a goalkeeper. You're in your own kind of part of the dressing room. During practice, you have your own set aside time periods. Um, Nowadays these boys have a massive they're much more connected to the fan via social media.
Mhm.
So a lot of guys, I mean, even our specialists will deactivate a Twitter or an Instagram during season. But it was a blessing to be able to play at UCLA. It's a phenomenal university, out on the west side of Los Angeles, playing at the Rose Bowl. And I think for me, the biggest thing I always tell people I take away from is I had a great experience, and I try to use all of that, into my coaching now. It's just when the boys are saying, "Hey, coach, what do you do in a backed up punt?" or when they're rushing or whatever, it's like, "Hey, I've been through that. I've lived that. I've seen that." So it was a great experience. I met a lot of awesome people, but now I just put it all into my coaching with the young lads.
I read online on the Punt Factory website that you once, well, you probably would have more played against him more than once. The legendary Reggie Bush back there returning punts. And I believe the quote online is he did nothing, but I'm curious to know what it was like punting against, such a character who was known for his explosive returns.
So I was lucky enough to go actually against a couple big returners. Reggie was one of them. I actually got housed by Deshaun Jackson as well. But my freshman year, that game was the big game that was being built up. We were, I think, 7 or 8-0. They were obviously undefeated. And, our campuses, for those that don't know, are about, I mean, if there's no traffic, which is impossible, about 15, 20 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
they're pretty close. And that week, you're kind of waiting up for it. We had a bye week. And for the old head college football fans, if they remember, the week before we played them, they played Fresno State, and he had 500 plus yards of offense by himself. 500 plus total
Crazy.
yards. And I was actually, well, a lot of people know this, but I was actually at a casino with my mates because we had an off week. It's called Morongo. And I remember stopping there, and we were looking at the TV, and my boys were like, "You're going to punt to that guy next week." And I'm like, shh, don't jinx it. But by the time he had a meaningful, like by the time he was able to return a punt, it was like 40-0. So he
Okay.
had no incentive to actually try. And
Yeah.
I
By
think,
40 to nothing to the Trojans.
yeah, we lost 66 to
Oh,
19. Yeah.
okay. Sorry to bring it up so.
No, it's okay. But just being on the same field as him and Matt, and at that time, some of the guys that are now pretty much all retired, but
Yeah.
hey, it pains me to say it because I hate that school, but give that man his Heisman back. He's one of the greatest players of all time. He's a
Yeah.
phenomenal player.
I mean, you were playing college football in its heyday, really. The height of the hype around college football, and when it was I mean, during the glory days. Who would you say would have been your inspiration during your playing days, if you could pick one person?
Oh gosh, you know, First of all, to your first point, I would agree with you. I'm a traditionalist.
Mm.
I love the Pac-10. Again, Pac-10, Pac-12, playing against
The Pac 2 now, whatever's left of it after it's
yeah, the
been decimated. Crazy.
um, I think looking back, I used to watch guys like Jeff Fiegels, who was a punter for the Giants at the time, Brad Maynard, and there was a guy called Mike Seifries, who actually now, small world, helped coach Dan down in San Diego this last year.
Yeah.
And he was a punter for the Chargers. And I'd watch those guys and just try to learn because, like I said, you really couldn't just go on YouTube and find hours of punting film. There wasn't a lot of punting coaching or kicking coaching at that point. It was kind of a couple companies spread out across the country. So I'd say those guys, when I got a chance, if they were showing a Giants game on a Sunday to watch, but a lot of it at that time was just other guys in the Pac-10 and, punters that came before you that you would have played against.
Yeah. So I suppose drawing inspiration from within the brotherhood of specialist players in the NFL and in college.
Yeah, UCLA at that time was really specialist U. Chris Saylor, All-American, two-time All-American, Nate Fixie, All-American, Chris Kluwe played 8 years in the NFL, myself, and then Jeff Locke, who played 6 years in the NFL. And I went to school during my 4 years with 2 Lou Groza winners, which was Justin Medlock and Kai Forbath.
Mm.
So, the standard, although you don't, I guess you didn't, I didn't know it at the time, to be put in that category and be on the record books with those type of players. Those guys are legends. So you kind of had to hold yourself to a high standard as well because UCLA, is such a historically powerhouse school of sports, with basketball and the other sports. So, just everywhere you walked around, man, people were winning gold medals and national championships. And it was just a great, experience to be a part of. All-American or and so I think just, getting to be at an institution like that where everyone you meet, we'd come back from summer break and go to camp, Jimmy, and be in the cold tub. And 2 of the track girls would walk in and you'd be like, hey, hey, how's your summer? Oh, good. I just was here taking summer school. What about you? Oh, I won silver medal in Beijing. And you're like, holy shit. No way. So, just a great experience to be a young person amongst so many high-level, high-character people.
No, absolutely. And is that what inspired you then, Aaron, to become a coach and to transition into the coaching side of things, to be able to lend all the experience you gained as a college football player to the up and coming generation?
Obviously, I'd be lying if I say I as like any athlete, I signed with the Patriots for about a month and did some other camps, and I always thought, hey, I'm going to play. But I'm a religious guy. I'm a believer in. I have faith, and I look back, and I really now think I was just getting all of the information and experience to then give it to kids for the next rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I never knew that it would turn into what it did. But I pretty much started coaching almost as soon as I got to college. And then really meeting some of the coaches I met, during and post UCLA, and then not making it, and coming to that realization was, okay, I want to now give to the next generation everything that I wish I had had. There wasn't a lot of coaches, Jimmy, at that time from 04. And so I kind of thought, okay, like if I can now be that guy for other guys, and then it's, being connected with Chris Saylor and these guys, it's blown up to what it is. And then obviously the boys have made it even better because of their accomplishments over the years.
Yeah, so you were really able to draw on your own personal experiences and learning as a college football punter to be able to. You were talking from a place of knowledge and experience, having been in their shoes and knowing what it takes to make it at that level and beyond.
Yeah, it's at early on, 2010, 2011, I started traveling with Saylor, who had obviously at that point now has a very established business. and every camp he would do around the country, I would just coach the punters. And it was 13, 14. I was living in San Diego, La Jolla, and I was coaching down there a couple boys, most notably Jake Bailey, who's now punting for the Dolphins. And then I would drive back up to Los Angeles a couple hours away and coach a couple boys. And that group collectively went to Johns Hopkins, Kansas, and Stanford, Arkansas, Oregon, Fresno State. And we were on the field one day, and one of the boys said, "Hey, this is like a punting factory, man. This is crazy." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds really cool." And hashtags were just becoming big, Instagram. And I was like, "Man, that's really cool." But punting factory is too long, and we kind of formed it. But yeah, I mean, at that time, I was still drawing off just everything that I had learned from guys, the sailors, Tom Ruins, the guys of the world that I had gotten a chance to work with, and just pouring it all into the sessions, the time with the boys, and then, like I said, they obviously make you look good when they go on and do great things.
So you were serving as the director of punting and still do with the Chris Saylor Kicking Academy, but then you kind of branched out on your own to form the Punt Factory.
Mm-hmm.
So specializing towards punters, obviously.
Yeah, so you have a lot of guys here, and I say this as delicately as possible, right? But you have a lot of specialist coaches here in America. I mean, it's a business, right? And Jimmy, they're coaching, snapping, and kicking, and I understand it because it's the market. But for me, I always just thought, well, I've never kicked a meaningful field goal in a game. I've never blocked anybody, but I have punted across every. So I'm just going to focus everything and try to become this niche of a niche coach and specialize in the punters. And Saylor really did give me a massive platform to kind of get experienced in organizing camps, running camps, evaluation, how to, compare multiple players at one time. And then, from that 2013, 2014 time, kind of putting my own character into it, my own experiences into it. And then, like I said, kind of evolving with the business now with the college camps and the recruiting side and all of these things. But yeah, like any good coach, you just learn from the coaches before you and then put your own spin on things and stick to a philosophy that you feel works.
So as part of working with Chris Saylor, you would have coached our own Dan Whelan when he was back in high school and at UC Davis. Could you see anything special in him then, Aaron, that said to you, this kid is going to go far in his career as a punter?
So, and Dan and I laughed about this the other day. So, Dan's story, I don't know how much I know there's been a lot of articles about him recently, but when Dan, so where I grew up in LA, kind of on the east side in Pomona, Dan lived out in the Palm Springs kind of desert area. So it wasn't that far. It was about an hour. And we met at a camp, at a Chris Saylor camp. We worked once or twice privately, and then we didn't work again for a while. And I saw him in February of his senior year. He showed up for a camp. He called me in June or July of that year going into UC Davis. And he goes, "Can we train?" I said, "Sure, absolutely. Let's get you ready." And he shows up to the session, and I said, "So how you been punting?" He goes, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, when's the last time you punted?" He goes, "Well, when did I see you last?" I said, "February at that camp." He goes, "Yeah, that's when I punted." I said, "Dan, you're going to be leaving to college in 3 weeks, buddy. What are we doing here?" And I still, somewhere in my phone, have a video from that session. He's wearing a tank top, but there was a reason that he had received a full scholarship because the kid was, 6'5", long, lanky.
Yeah.
And he had a cannon of a leg. And if you know or you ever get a chance to speak to Dan Hawkins, who was his college coach, still the head coach at UC Davis, that's his style. He loves the big, strong.
Yeah.
He's also a well-traveled. He likes the international players. So Dan Whelan just fit everything about what Hawkins wanted. But really from that point on, Jimmy, we started training every break. Every time he was back home down in Southern California, if I would travel up to the Bay Area for any camps or anything, he would come out. I mean, he's probably one of the one of the guys I've coached the most during their college experience ever, just because, his mom, Ann, was so supportive and so, Aaron, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
How do we need to get Dan better? Where are you going to be? Let's just meet. Let's make it work. And so it just became a long relationship. And there was a point when he was going into his last year, I want to say, we did a session in Ontario. And I still have the film of that. I can email it to you after, but where I just said, dude, you have it, because he was hitting the ball that there wasn't a lot of people in the world that could hit consistently.
Yeah.
And it was just a really cool culmination of like watching him be this kid that was like not truly like, I don't want to speak for him, like, but didn't realize how big playing college football was, and kind of those first couple of weeks, he didn't play, and to being an All-American and go, I mean, just his transition, was awesome to be a part of and watch.
And that transition and that growth is finally bearing fruit now, as he's on the cusp of becoming the first Irishman to play in the NFL in about 40 years. I mean, for you as his coach, that must be just absolutely awesome to see that happening.
Like my part in their life, and I always say this, right, is like, it's so, I would hope I would hope people, and they feel like it's a big part, because to say I'm his coach is a blessing. But I mean, that kid has earned everything. That kid has earned, I mean, he has gone and done the training camps, the free agent camps, the senior camps, he went to the XFL. And it's one thing to get there, but you still have to perform.
Yeah.
And then to kind of follow along with him while he was competing against Pat O'Donnell, who's a legend, a veteran. Those guys don't typically lose their spot.
Yeah.
To get the call from Ann, and then his agent Carter, it was like unbelievable. I mean, I just texted Ann, I just said, "Holy shit!" Wow. Because it's just like, he did
a great sense of accomplishment for everyone involved in the whole process.
I mean, and then you start to realize exactly why we're on this podcast, right? Like, it's bigger than just him making the Packers. I mean, it's a country that football, I'm sure, is growing there, just from what I kind of see. But 40 years to not have a player, and you have an athletic population. I mean, you have the Gaelic football, the soccer, the rugby, but to not have an NFL player, arguably one of the biggest sports in the world, and now have Dan go. I mean, again, it's just looking at it from the outside. I mean, it's such a special moment.
I'm sure you've been keeping track on the up and coming college football players coming out of the Emerald Isle. I mean, most recently, or most notably, Ross Balger committing to Idaho State, to play there for 2 years. I mean, and even predecessor to Ross and Ronan, we have the likes of David Shanahan playing for Georgia Tech, who came through Pro Kick Australia. So from your perspective, how big of a pool of potential college football and indeed NFL players are in Ireland right now?
So without having been as obviously, not being on the ground there, just from an outsider's perspective, I feel like what you're seeing is kind of where, and I hesitate to say this because Australia has really, we have a bit of our academy down there. They've obviously produced some very high level players, but Ireland seems like it's almost like a sleeping giant, that you have these big, strong athletes who are natural ball strikers that have just not been introduced to the sport. I don't want to say properly, right, but fully, where there's a position that essentially fits your guys' natural skill set, right? You have soccer players. So I think Ireland and the UK in general, I mean, Jamie Gillan coming from Inverness, right? There is a lot of talent over there that I think has never just shifted its thought process to American football.
So, you're talking now about expanding the Punt Factory into the UK potentially. Is Ireland a market that you're going to look at now that we've kind of realised, hang on a second, there's this whole untapped vein of potential college football punters and kickers just waiting to be tapped.
So one thing about kicking coaching, right? And it's kind of interesting, and we'll kind of bring to light. You guys have a guy there called Ty Leader right now that's doing a really good job. The Punt Factory, we've talked about going into the UK for a while, and I've talked to Jamie about it. So I've coached Jamie for a couple years, obviously, and I know he's been back a few times, kind of pre and post COVID, to do some NFL UK work in Scotland with the rugby teams. But the guy that I'm looking to work with, a kid called Brad out of London, is his brand is called United Kicking. But there's a lot more kickers than punters, right? Because there's not been a lot of punting coaching. He's actually really close with Leader. So it's one of those things when I say kind of kicking coaches are territorial, it's like if there was ever a time, I'll put it like this, that I could help or partner or do a camp with, Leader, or lend an expertise in any way from a punt kind of expert coaching, I would love to do that because I think that there's a lot of room there. But I think we're mostly going to start out of London for now, just because Brad has a base there. And I've talked a little bit to Jamie about maybe in the off season trying to do some stuff in Scotland, and but I mostly just as a coach, number one, just want to try to bring, like you said, special teams and football to a part of the world where, I feel like it's with the NFL in London, it's right on the cusp of just absolutely blowing up.
Absolutely.
And you got a great kicking coach there. So, if I ever got a chance, and if he watches this, man, I'd love to. I know he's close with Brad, but I'd love to help whoever I can because Ireland is a beautiful place.
But you've actually spent some time here as well. And before we started recording, you were telling me you had a tryout with my own Drogheda United back in the day. So I told you,
Yeah.
I told you I'd bring it up.
You know what? I went 3 times. I played 4 years goalkeeper professionally once I was done with football, and I went with Drogheda in 14, and then in 16 I went and did like a Bray, Limerick, Galway, Sligo trial, and then I went back one more time at the ripe age of 31, and was with Sligo for another couple weeks. But not having a visa, who would have known that makes it hard to sign you? But I just think the country in general is one of the most beautiful. I just think it's an amazing place. I very much enjoyed, being there and staying there. And there's a gym I really like I think it's called the Ivy, right in Dublin.
Okay.
The food is, I can't say enough beautiful things about your country. And I do think it's going to be really cool to see how football takes off there. Moving forward.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the popularity increasing year on year. Even since I've been involved in American football. In terms of though potential kickers, if there are any potential, kickers considering taking up American football, listening in, do you think GA players or rugby players are more suited to be, out of the two of them, which skill set fits the skill set required for college punters or kickers the most?
It's an interesting one because I think you have the best of both worlds. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Gaelic football, right? The ball's in their hands quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
So the movement, the muscle memory of ball from hand down to foot is obviously just by nature a lot more translated to punting. Obviously, why I like the Australian rules football guys translate into punting because it's moving around with the ball in your hands and then dropping it to your foot, right? Typically with the rugby players, we'll see a lot more of them become kickers because they kick off the ground quite a bit and they have to get lift. But, if you're a 6'2", 6'3" athlete who can just kick things, you can be trained either way. But typically we'll see rugby go off the place kicking, and we'll see the I guess from Ireland, the GA guys go into the punting just because of the ball from hand to foot. But I'm sure, again, talented enough, if you can strike a ball, with some proper coaching, you can get into either.
Absolutely. Looking at Ross Balger from a GA, almost a purely GA background, I believe he's serving as Idaho State's kicker and punter. So best of both worlds there. And personally, I'm sure you've watched him on tape, Aaron, and you've analysed in more detail than what we could see with the naked eye, but I can kind of tell already that he's going to be the next in a long line of future NFL stars from Ireland.
I mean, I'll tell you what, right? The NFL is such an interesting game, and one thing that we are doing very well here is we're like wouldn't call them farm leagues, Jimmy, but obviously the XFL, the USFL. Now there's more opportunity, and I think with Ireland, with the international card, it opens up Canada a lot more as well. But there's more avenues to now become a professional in this sport than there's been in a really long time. Like I said, Dan coming from the XFL. So, I think that, a guy like Ross and just Irish kids in general, again, if they watch this and it's something that they have any interest in, pursue it. Because, we've got 890, I should know this number, 897, something like that, college football programs, right? About 225 are Division One, right? Where Division Two, you can get scholarship money. Division Three, you can get academic scholarship money. NAIA, you can get athletic and academic. Junior college or Scott. I mean, there's more opportunity now to come here to play and then to take it to a level, than there's ever been. So, to be an international player, and also now compared to 10, 15 years ago, it's so much more accepted and understood and embraced, right, than it's ever been. And Dan is a huge reason for that as well.
Yeah. So outside of Dan, can you tell us about some of the more noteworthy NFL punters that you've coached? Obviously, you mentioned the Scottish Hammer, Jamie Gillan there, but anyone else that our listeners might be familiar with?
So currently, guys that I would say, hey, that they've come through the Punt Factory Academy would be Dan, and then right across his biggest rival, there's a young man called Ryan Wright, who's the current punter for the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
So Ryan went to Tulane. We met when he was in college, and then we trained a bit during COVID. And ironically, when they were done in college, him and Dan, I hosted this like week-long NFL prep combine week, and two of the three boys were Dan and Ryan. And now they're both playing. And actually, Ryan was one of the first people to text me. He said, "Holy crap, send me Dan's number now. I need to make sure this is real," and then congratulate. So there's a hefty built-in rivalry there. The other boy would be Jake Bailey, who was with the New England Patriots. Now he's with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
So Jamie, Dan, Ryan, and Jake are the big four. There's one other guy, Colby Wadman, who was in the USFL last year. He just had he actually worked out for the Eagles this week. I think he'll be back in soon, and that would make five. But, and I don't know if you can see it, but I've got their jerseys there.
Nice.
A couple of the boys. That's Jamie and Colby played against each other, and I went and watched. But, yeah, those are the four right now at the NFL level. Again, super proud of them, man. And
as a coach, there must be a massive sense of pride and accomplishment in seeing something that you built lead to, something that's as big as the NFL. It doesn't get much bigger than the NFL. So for you as their coach, how does it just feel seeing those boys play week in, week out on Sundays?
I always, one of my mottos, right? One of the business kind of mottos is I want them to have a better experience than I ever had, right? Everyone. And I had a pretty damn good experience. So for them to get to that level and where they got the jets flying over every game before and pregame and the national anthem, like I said, I've got a 5-year-old boy, Finley. Ironically, our first trip together was to Ireland, my wife and I. And so we gave an Irish name, but we for him to have the boys coming into the house for training and for that, there's no more special feeling as a coach, as a father, as a, and at that age, as a friend to these guys, as a mentor, where it's just like, dude, you did it. And don't get me wrong, the work is just starting. With their conversation was, "I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Okay, what are you struggling with lately? What can we work on? How can I help?" But you have to have that moment, both them and for me, of reflection of dude, this is, if nothing else happens, this is one of the greatest accomplishments in sport, is getting to the highest level and playing there. And may it last forever. May he be there for 20 years.
Absolutely. I've one last question for you, Aaron, before I let you go, and apologies again for the technical difficulties. There's
Oh,
always
good.
something. Gremlins. So obviously you played for the Bruins back in your playing days in the Pac-10, subsequently the Pac-12, and now it's been decimated down to the Pac-2. So with all the shifting and changing taking place in college football, who's your pick for the national championship this year?
Well, not UCLA, unfortunately. I hope we beat Coastal Carolina tonight as 17-point favorites. And again, it's becoming a more. Listen, if you have the money to get the best recruits now, unfortunately, that's what it's becoming, right? With
Yeah,
NIL, which is great for the player, but probably one of. And I haven't looked at the rankings. I typically, Jimmy, now I don't even look at who's playing. I look at which of my guys, because we've got probably between 100 and 200 kids at the college level
okay,
at all levels that are starting. So I'm kind of like, who's the D2, who's he playing against this weekend? Where can I watch it, or D1? But
yeah,
I would assume probably Georgia or Alabama, one of those two teams. It seems like they're, and we saw what happened when, not to badmouth the Horned Frogs, but when an outlier got in, they got absolutely massacred.
yep, I remember.
So probably Georgia or Alabama, man. Who's your pick? I know you're an Irish fan.
I'm a Notre Dame fan. And I'm cautiously optimistic. We always have trouble with the big games, but now we have an absolute dog in Sam Hartman, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of a difference he can make. And if we can get something going, I think Notre Dame have always been there or thereabouts. They've always been missing that one key piece, which is the quarterback. So getting to see him up close and playing in Dublin was pretty cool to start off the season.
One of the best memories I have from playing college football, I don't know if I mentioned this, was we played at Notre Dame my sophomore year. And running out of the tunnel when they were playing that fight song, seeing the little leprechaun, that and that was when they had the famous grass, the really
Yeah,
long. There were mushrooms growing in the end zone. I mean, it was wild. But one of the hands down best experiences of my career was getting to play there. I mean, that is a holy's the wrong word, but that doesn't get
yeah.
more hallowed than Notre Dame Stadium. Seeing the little touchdown Jesus, and we all asked collectively if we could go see the sign that's behind you, and they told us to fuck off. They said absolutely not. Um, but yeah, man, I had to mention that to you because if there's any other place I could have ever played, Notre Dame probably would have been in.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I'm going back over now for my fourth trip to South Bend in October. It's definitely a special place.
Absolutely, man. Well, like I said, man, I think the one thing we can both agree on is that Ireland's going to be a lot more in tune to the games now, and obviously him playing for such a storied franchise like the Packers. Um, I'm sure Dan would appreciate the you taking the time to ask about him and his story, and if there's anything else moving forward I can help with or fill you in on, man, just let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And for any aspiring NFL or college punters or kickers in Ireland watching this, make sure to drop Aaron a follow on Instagram and Twitter
Yeah,
for some insights at the Punt Factory on both those social media channels. Aaron, listen, thank you so much for your time. Really, really enjoyed our conversation, and all the best for the future.
Jimmy, thank you, man. God bless, and I look forward to seeing you sometime soon, brother.
Take care.